Belarus gained independence in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. In 1994, democratic election took place and Alexander Lukashenko became the leader, subsequently consolidating power to attain full control over the country. Employing various methods including violence against deputies, abductions and assassinations of opposite figures, Lukashenko ignored laws and centralized authority. In 1996, a referendum granted Lukashenko the authority to dissolve parliament, declare referendums and appoint key officials. He unlawfully dismissed and later physically eliminated the head of the Central Election Commission, replacing her with Lydia Yermoshina, who was completely subservient to him. Lukashenko gained complete control over the courts, law enforcement agencies and the electoral system, ensuring his unlimited continuations in power. In 2004, an unlawful referendum annulled presidential term limits, allowing a single individual to run for office an unlimited number of times. Only deputies supporting Lukashenko were elected to parliament, enabling them to pass laws in his favor. From the outset of his rule, Lukashenko subjugated the economy, creating a system that allowed him to siphon off budgetary funds through companies owned by his associates, granting tax breaks and ensuring other special conditions. Additionally, he established a system to control every official within the power structure he built. He exercised control over officials, from ministers to local administrative representatives, offering them freedom to engage in corruption in exchange for absolute loyalty. During the presidential elections in 2006 and 2010, Lukashenko falsified the vote count, claiming an 80% majority. Mass protest ensued, harshly suppressed by authorities, and the opposition candidates faced criminal charges. In 2020, a new pre-election campaign began in Belarus, bringing first new leaders. For the first time in our modern history, a wave of true solidarity emerged among people weary after more than 27 years of Lukashenko's rule. People finally felt like a nation, a real family that simply thought justice and fair elections. However, violence erupted once again. Lukashenko chose the only familiar way to deal with the population: dispersing rallies, shutting down stores displaying national symbols, and imprisoning the most threatened presidential candidates to the regime. Then came the day of the elections. The majority of Belarusians voted for opposition candidate Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. However, Lukashenko falsified the elections, claiming 80% of the votes for himself. Hundreds of thousands of citizens took to the streets in peaceful demonstrations. However, the authorities didn't listen to them. Instead, they deployed thousands of security forces and military personnel against the peaceful protests, who simply wanted change. Unfortunately, the peaceful expression of protest was brutally suppressed by aggressive armed forces. The frightened and intimidated regime began forcefully defending itself. This was evident in the use of stun grenades, mass beatings, cases of violence, torture and cruelty in detention facilities. Subsequently, the authorities aimed to weaken Belarus civil society. Lukashenko ordered the closure of all non-profit organizations engaged in charity, ecology, literature, architectural heritage protection, and the search for missing persons. Closed independent trade unions were shut down, and their leaders were imprisoned. Even lawyers defending dissidents against the regime were sentenced to lengthy terms. Human rights organizations report that since August 2020, 880 non-profit organizations have disappeared in Belarus. All opposition political parties have been dissolved. Presently, there are only 4 parties in the country, all of which support the government. This is an atmosphere of fear in our country for those who don't express full support for Lukashenko's regime or disagree with his policies. Security forces regularly conduct unexpected checks in public institutions during working hours, examine employers' funds. If they find something inappropriate, such as subscription to independent media or messaging apps, fines, and one-day arrest and imposed. Even a comment against the authorities on social media can lead to imprisonment, with some receiving a few days sentence and others several years in prison. People in Belarus are being arrested for displaying symbols of peace and non-violence, using the Belarusian language or wearing opposite colors. The international community reacts to the situation in Belarus, condemning human rights violations. Events in Belarus underscore the necessity of protecting democratic values. Belarusian citizens face risk when expressing their beliefs and striving for freedom, requiring greater attention and, most importantly, action from the global community. It is crucial to continue monitoring events in Belarus closely, raise concern about human rights violations, and actively support Belarusian citizens seeking change. Democracy and human rights are universal values that demand protect and support. Presently, the security forces in Belarus have complete freedom for use violence without adhering to laws. They forcibly break doors, make arrests, and employ cruel methods of detention and torture in prisons. Justice appointed by Lukashenko increasingly ignore laws and norms, respecting the interest of the authorities. Propagandists from state media have been granted freedom of expression to denigrate and insult anyone who disagrees with the government. Today's Belarus, in essence, resembles the world depicted in George Orwell's novel 1984, or the governing regime of North Korea. The country is swiftly moving toward an even more authoritarian dictatorship and transforming into a police state. The majority of people in Belarus don't support Russian military aggression against Ukraine, yet the government is entirely dependent on Russia and its provided credits. Any expression of protest against the war in the street or in social media immediately faces harsh arrest and imprisonment. An example of this, the case of a singer performing in Ukrainian language, for which she was sent to prison. Belarus is experiencing a historical decline in culture, economics, and human rights. All national and independent structures are being dismantled. The authorities have started to intervene in children's upbringing, promoting militarism and aggression. For citizens of countries with developed democracies, it might be difficult to imagine what it's like to live in such conditions, where you can be detained without grounds for any action you take. However, we are in a struggle for our lives, our rights and freedoms, and for the future of our children. Over 150,000 people are forced to leave their hometown due to the persecution, with more than 1,600 political prisoners in a country where Europe's last dictator holds onto power. We continue the fight. Your support is crucial for us. We simply wish for you to remember us and perhaps share our aspiration for freedom and justice. Together we can achieve more. To reach more people, please share this among your friends and acquaintances and show your support by liking this video.